This is the Angry Birds Bird Minute, sponsored by Angry Birds for their 15th anniversary, where we tell you all about a cool bird that may or may not be angry. Today's bird is Ruppel's griffon vulture. Ruppel's griffon vulture is the world's highest flying bird, soaring to heights over 37,000 feet. That's 11,300 meters. They can be found at airplane cruising altitudes well above the height even of Mount Everest. They have a special protein which allows their blood to absorb oxygen very efficiently, an adaptation necessary to survive at heights that would leave any human fleeing for denser altitudes. Ruppel's griffon vultures also have incredible endurance and speed, traveling for 6 or 7 hours a day at speeds of up to 22 miles per hour. They use the enormous daily range this gives them to follow game herds, seeking out their diet of carrion. They prefer to feast on the fresh leftovers of predators like lions. But are they angry? On a scale of 1 to angry, we rate the Ruppel's griffon vulture as highfalutin. This is Wild Green Streams. I'm Rhett.
I'm Io.
And I'm Brian.
And our guest today is adventurer, writer, YouTuber, polyjobist, man of many titles, Dr. Beau Miles. Beau, how the hell are you?
I'm pretty good, man. I'm on the other side of the world, so I tip of the cap to you for doing this at whatever hour it is over there, because I imagine it's not as easy on you as it is for me. So thanks for having me, team.
Turned out not too bad. It's only like 6 p.m. over here.
Oh, as a parent, that's hardcore. You know, that's So well done. That's good. I'm usually in bed by 7:45, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should start out by saying, could you tell us a little bit about your videos?
Yeah, look, I never meant to, I mean, we talked briefly just before you pushed record then a moment ago, and you guys were saying that your background is in conservation and in sort of green ethics and just being good humans. I never meant to be either a green warrior or a good human in any way, shape, or form. I didn't call myself this. Someone called me an accidental activist, and I know that word's been used a bunch for people that become, I don't know, someone who's kind of an environmental steward by mistake, and I think that's kind of where I'm at. So I never really meant to make videos or films or tell stories that had an environmental bent about them, other than to say I just love being outside, and that's what's out there, you know, trees and other animals and nice fresh air and wind and all these things that I always took them for granted, but I certainly don't now that I realise how much at stake things are. So, yeah, I'm just a storyteller that goes and does things. I'm an outdoorsman that paddles and runs around the place and makes YouTube films out of them.
For a lot of us, speaking for myself, it's like just playing outdoors as a kid and just being fascinated with what you see around. Was there any kind of single thing that propelled you down this path of interest, or is it just, you know, experiencing it and being like, I like this, I just want to keep doing more of it?
Well, I give my parents the full sort of outdoor bent thing from a young age. So they get the first nod of being, Mum's an avid gardener and just an outdoor person and a workaholic. She just works her ass off. And so I remember her digging holes and chopping wood and big hat on and just making the outdoor life a good life. I remember that as a kid. That's where it was really interesting and curious. Dad was much the same, but Dad was an artist. So he very much likes landscape and travelling through landscapes. He was a truck driver artist. So this really weird blend of going places all the time, but then coming back to a studio and painting it. So he had a really good relationship with the world, I think, and interpretation, which is kind of what I do now. So they started me off. But funnily enough, you ask, Io, I've got a film coming out shortly, which is about where my worldview came from.
Perfect.
The title might even be that. And I think it kind of stems in a Beau sense or a professional sense, how I've made money out of being an outdoor person from a school camp at the age of 14, where I went and did cool things in the outdoors, where I hiked for the first time with a big pack on my back. And I thought, wow, this is a job. This is cool as heck, you know. So that's kind of where it started. And I went back there for the first time in 30 years and thought, wow, this might be where my identity started to get its foundation, like genuine adult foundations. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that those formative experiences as a school camp kid were put me on a path to where you and I are chatting today.
Where was it? Yeah, where was enlightenment reached?
It's called Wollongara, which is at the edge of the mountains in Victoria, Australia. So it's a cool place, and it was it was super reflective being back there. I'm a father of two now, doing all this stuff. I'm at an age where what's the point of your adulthoodness and your career and all this stuff? So that was really cool. And that led me on to a lot. I spent 10 years in the US at a summer camp. And so I really like these really intense seasonal experiences of something like a summer camp and of outdoor education and expeditions where you roll so much potential into pockets of time. I thought that was really powerful. And if you do it outdoors with a canoe and some good friends or in environments that are unfamiliar to you or becoming familiar to, I just think it's super powerful.
Yeah, the fully immersive total experience is like the most bang for your buck you can get in terms of an outdoor experience.
Yeah. Well, look, and the Southern Hemisphere we don't have our year split up like the Northern Hemisphere, or particularly America. The summer camp system, that's a thing that, you could create a whole culture of people around those sort of 3, 4, 6, 8 week experiences over summer where the independence that I saw these young people get was just awesome. Based on these, it almost forces the kid's hand to, you don't lose that sense of curiosity, and it's not a sense of growing up, but it's a sense of ownership and accountability that's really good. I thought it was great.
Grabbing a topic from one of your videos, what's it like sleeping in the top of a gum tree?
It was pretty good, Rhett. It was the biggest thing I can say about it was the movement. I didn't expect such a really solid, big, thick chunk tree to have that lovely sense of movement. I felt like I was kind of on a boat, a gentle boat. But so that was kind of the revelation was, wow, very rarely do you sleep and have movement anymore unless you're on a boat or maybe a train or sleeping in a car, but you expect that sense of movement and it's only short-lived. Whereas all night, there's this thing, you're just blowing in the wind. It was really cool.
Sounds kind of nice, actually.
It was really good. I didn't sleep great because I had it half in my mind that I might die if things went bad. And I rolled off too much and my harness didn't work. There was a little bit. I've never spent a night in a portaledge, like the climbers, and I must do. I think that's a grouse idea. I think that'd be fun.
I find that mortal danger is usually not conducive to a good night's rest, but I'm sure there are some out there. and yet
you do it for a story as much as you do it for the experience. So yeah, I slept real well the following night, knowing that I'd slept pretty crap the night before. But I'm always happy to have those experiences that are not, and that's the point. Often they're unpleasant or uncomfortable, but they're brilliant because of that. And I actually enjoy the uncomfortability because I know it's very easy just to go and have a good night's rest in a bed. So when I have that on the horizon, these things I embrace.
That's interesting you say. I know you've spoken before after doing your mile-an-hour marathon. For those who don't know, it's 24 hours, about 1 mile every hour. And then Beau had maximal productivity, I think is what you called it, where you did as many possible tasks as you could in between, which looked just completely exhausting. But I know you've mentioned before that you slept a normal amount of hours after it and felt just completely great. So I'm wondering, all of these journeys that you go on and kind of push your body to these extremes or do these odd things, what has this taught you about the machine that is Beau?
Well, it's taught me that fundamentally, Brian, I only have one expertise in life, and that's my own body, my own self. So I'm not sure what Brian or Io or Rhett are capable of, but I can say that I'm not quite sure what I'm capable of yet either, other than to say it's bloody amazing. Humans are and look, that's so super cliche. So many folks say that the body is incredible. So I think with our modern era of computers and screens and so much availability of knowledge in our pockets, we don't often let our bodies kind of go find stuff out for us, nor put it on the front line of using our physicality to find out what knowledge is. I really want to explore the world through my body and through my full set of senses, and I'm glad I'm still in that world because I think it's very easy to ignore what our body knows. So without getting too kind of philosophical about it, I think I just trust myself to use my body to find stuff out. Yesterday, I ran around the village where I live 8 or 10 kilometres with a wheelbarrow with a Christmas tree in it, trying to give it away to people. And I could have very easily done that with my trailer or on the roof rack of the car or on the back of the tractor and not used my body as the mechanism to give the tree away. But it made the day by using my body to do it rather than a vehicle. And I think the more we do that, the better. Some cultures do this by default of having a rice paddy and a garden, and they have to be physical to feed themselves. And many of us, like me, I only eat 5% of my food out of my garden and the rest I buy out of a supermarket. So that I have to find these ways to use my body in other ways.
Do people in your village know about your videos, or do they, I mean, maybe you did this stuff before then too, but did they just like see you running around with a wheelbarrow and a Christmas tree and they're like, oh yeah, that's Beau? Or are they like, oh, he's making a video right now?
Yeah, it's a good observation, Rhett. I actually said that to Camry yesterday. I said, I used to be a bit of a novel sideshow in the area, and people were wondering what was happening, but now I say, yep, there's Beau, he's up to something. And they sort of just, they wave in a very normal way now rather than wave in what's going down way.
They're going to have to relocate soon. They're getting far too respectable.
That's right.
So you often eat and drink food discarded and partially eaten on the side of the road. How far can one man's immune system go?
I get a lot of flack for that, eating things that I find on the, whether it's roadside fruit or things that other people have discarded. And gloves. People really get into me about not wearing gloves when I'm picking up rubbish or planting trees or something. Look, I think I've got a really healthy immune system when I'm a regular human, but I've gone through the era of young kids who are at daycare and at kindergarten and school at the moment. So I've been the sickest I've ever been for the last couple of years. I've turned every cold that's walked through the door into pneumonia or bloody, typhoid. I've been so sick. So in one hand, I might say, yeah, I'm fine to eat things off the side of the road that are pretty skanky or disgusting, but maybe it's part of my anti system at the moment. I don't know, but it's served me pretty well for 42 years anyway before this last couple of years.
Maybe daycares are actually more contagion-filled than roadside.
That I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Do any of you guys have kids?
No, but I have friends and family who do, and it's just a constant cycle.
It is lethal. It's like walking into a bloody war zone. When I pick up my kids and I walk into the room that they've spent the day, and there's 5 kids within arm reach of my kid, and they've just got snot running down their face. They've got, their jumper is full of conjunctivitis. They're just walking infections. And I get it, because that's how our kids become then. That's how they grow their immune system, I figure. But well, that's what they say, isn't it? So it's just part and parcel of being a parent. It freaking sucks, but it's part of it.
Actually, I have family in Australia. They live in Sydney area, and I was there last year, and I was, seeing all of them. And one of my cousins has a young kid who was, I want to say maybe 3 at the time. But it was great because I hadn't met him before and everything. But she was saying like, yeah, it's just pretty much of like his nose is always just a little bit running, and it's like, is that the normal, your nose is always running, or is it like an extra something on top of that, your nose is always running? So it's always a fun mystery to figure out. And so maybe your body just was like, oh yeah, I can handle the outdoors, but then it's you got used to that arena, but then the arena of small children is like, this is a whole other animal.
Well said, yeah. And my mum always warned me. I've done physical hard things my whole life by choice, right? And I love it. I love going for long runs and long paddles and whatever. I think that's the easiest kind of hardship. And I always thought that kids would be a piece of cake. And in some respects, if all I was a parent, it would be a piece of cake. But I'm trying to be a filmmaker, writer, and a parent at the same time. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done, the balancing act. And so, yeah, it's a hell of an adventure. You're right.
How are the chickens?
Good question, Rhett. I got asked that question yesterday too. You folks must have good ESP over there because... Yeah, the chickens are good. We're down to only one original, which is a bit sad. We lost one pretty soon after they were given their new home. We think to poisoning. There was some noxious berries, some evening nightshade, which is like a potato, or a weed potato, and we think that was one. And then a fox has taken one just in the middle of the day when the girls are out having their saunter around and their scratch around the place. So they got a life of luxury. They're out 10 hours a day and they have to run the gauntlet of foxes in the area, and we've had one taken. But so we're a bit nervous about that. We're going to enclose it now, but otherwise, terrific. We're 3 eggs a day, and we do not have dogs. We've got a lot of rabbits. We've got the neighbour's cat. So there's a few feral animals around.
Yeah. So we raised a number of chickens growing up, and the moment our dogs died, one by one, every chicken got taken by a hawk or a fox or something. That seems to be the only, no matter how much we tried, the dogs were the only thing that worked for us.
No, good point. Yeah, same with me growing up. We had really crap chicken cages growing up, but we always had a dog, an Australian blue heeler, and she was fierce. She just kept it, humans included. So we had an isolated life for many years based on our dog just only loving 4 people, and that was it, and 4 chickens.
I was watching your film about running the Australian Alps walking trail just before we recorded today. And I realized, just coincidentally, we actually have had 2 FKT holders on the show in the last week, because we had Tara Dower on last week. And it looks like you started the FKT trend for that trail. What was that project like?
It was cool. Yeah. I mean, I have a real thing for first known times in a sense too. So picking a trail that's never been run before because it's obscure or it's too hard or it's just out of the way or whatever it might be. So yeah, that was pretty cool. I was super surprised when that kernel of an idea, it was around 2010, that one of our most famous walking paths, it's the equivalent of your Pacific Crest or your Appalachian Trail. Not as long, nowhere near as long. It's only about 400 miles, but it's over pretty wild terrain, particularly for Australia. Very little access. Only 10 or 11 roads cross it for the whole entirety. Wow. And those roads are pretty out there. You know, half of those are four-wheel drive tracks or just dirt roads. So when I first looked into it, running it, I thought, surely this has been run before. And it had been attempted for 5 or 6 summers before that by several runners that were kind of in the mix. Really good long ultra runners, had a lot more experience than me. So I thought, righto, let's give it a go. You know, I was a bit younger than these guys and a bit more stupid, and I suppose I used that to my advantage. But what I think, because I ended up being the first person to run it, was that I love being I run because I love being in the outdoors, and I love running too. It's a really nice combination. That sounds funny to say, but I think a lot of runners love running. Mm-hmm. And they don't necessarily love where they are as much, whereas I just loved being in the bush. And I like the bush for all of its elements too. I don't mind it when it's driving rain or snowing or bloody greasy or like a blizzard. I think that's wonderful. And so I'm quite comfortable with myself being in the mountains to some degree. And so I think I was just willing to – and look, I had really good weather to some degree as well. It was only 1 or 2 big storm fronts came through. So I got lucky with the weather. Things just worked. I like being out there and I yeah.
That's interesting. Do you think that your perception of that kind of distance has changed since running it, right? Like knowing that it's an achievable kind of distance to be able to do, does that shrink it? Does that grow it in your mind? How does that affect your conception?
It did, yeah. Scale, Brian, is everything to us so-called adventure types, isn't it? And my scale has since increased. I realise now it's kind of increased, but then it's come back with my book called The Backyard Adventure is trying to find as much bang for buck in the smallest space as possible. And you've got to pick those spaces sometimes. It can't just be anywhere or everywhere. You've got to give it some thought for how you can make that space interesting and how you perceive it, et cetera, et cetera. But you're right in the sense that I've now moved into the 100-kilometre and I'm wanting to move into running my first miler. I've never run those sort of long one-day distances, nor racing people. I've always just raced myself. And so that really fascinates me because you definitely push yourself harder when you've got someone hunting you down or when you're hunting someone. I think it's kind of fun. You know, there's just that fun element to it. And it's a lovely camaraderie in that. When someone passes you, I'd be the first to pat them on the back and say, good for you, you bloody go, you good thing. But that's pretty new to me. But the scale of, I always thought, why would you ever run 100 Ks in a day or 100 miles in a day? That's stupid. I'd rather not ruin tomorrow. I don't have hangovers these days because I don't want to ruin tomorrow. And why would I run so far that I can't walk tomorrow? So I always kind of thought that as my default. But now I'm thinking, you know what? There's such amazing experiences. Go long. Go. You know, scale up.
Love that.
No hangovers with the exception of excessive bean effects, right?
Well, I can tell you, Brian, I ate beans, I think it was 2 days later, and I didn't record it. Should have been. It was the best finishing the film. I should have done it. But yeah, I'm still not sick of beans, and I get asked that question all the time, but I kind of know what you mean. Yeah, this whole don't do something so much that you hate it in the aftermath, and I agree with that.
How do you approach stories? Because the thing that you do with your videos is really amazing in that you can take anything from kayaking around the bottom of Africa or chopping wood in your backyard. And either way, the storyline is, I don't know, I feel like it really carries it. And it talk about scale. It feels as though a complete thing has happened either way. How do you think about it when you're thinking about how you're going to present something or how you're going to arrange the things that happen on these challenges?
Well, it's kind of, I can tell you how I make stories now, and it hasn't always been that way. And I get called a good storyteller a lot by folks, and I'm apprehensive to take that title because I've had to work really hard to become a good storyteller. And I actually have really good help now too. So I'm in the studio now with my collaborator, Mitch, who's on another computer. But the two of us make really good stories in a sense. I'm now using often another person's images to tell my internal monologue of a story. And I'm quite a selfish storyteller too. Often they're from my point of view, they're my worldview, they're my narrative, it's my voice, it's my cadence in a sense. So I've only recently gone on to try and help tell other people's stories, and I'm not as good at it because of all of the moving parts of other people's ideas and their script and their monologue coming out too. So I've got to be a bit more compliant to that or thoughtful. But fundamentally, nowadays, to give you just an example of how I tell a story. So 2 days ago, I ran around my village trying to give away a Christmas tree. So we shoot the lights out, right? We try and shoot an introduction that tells you, the viewer, what I'm about to do. Then I go and do it. And you hope to think that you say enough throughout the day that is warranted of a film, of a backbone of a film. So today, after I finish talking to you folks, I will now whittle that 1 or 2 hour narrative that was recorded down to, say, 20 minutes, and then we start to make a film. So everything that we do now is based on the best voice that comes out of it. And it's very aftermath. The story always comes in post-production, which is the opposite of Hollywood, right? Who have a script that is incredibly chewed over, every word is worth its salt, and the writer has reduced this essences thing to a screenplay that's it, that's your Bible. And very rarely is an actor given levity to move off that. Whereas all I want to do is move off my skeleton of an idea in a sense, because I only set off 2 days ago with a 50-word synopsis of what this Christmas tree thing might look like, and it has to take its own life as it evolves throughout that day. And so that's kind of that's my bread and butter these days. Have a small idea, expand it, then reduce it in the aftermath.
There is, of course, merit to planning things out a lot, but sometimes it's sort of like if you're writing something, you can get writer's block, write yourself into a corner and you don't know where to go. Well, if you just instead of waiting to resolve that before you start, you just let the thing happen, and then you're like, I didn't even think that could have been a storyline, and it just so happened that this made it a great way through. So it's a great way of letting other factors at play and sort of not quite letting the universe decide, but it gives you a lot more options that you don't have to always think about it. You don't have to plan everything yourself at the beginning. It can grow and evolve as it moves on, and that's really cool.
Yeah, you're dead right. But it is riskier. I can understand why Hollywood doesn't go with my methodology of just getting 5 of the best actors in a room. Go for it. I totally get it. And yet, from a viewer's perspective, and this is why YouTube is so successful, because we often want to often be led down a path of the unknown. It's a really attractive thing. 9 out of 10 films that I watch nowadays, they're very predictable in a sense. You kind of know what's going to happen because that's the way stories and big budget stories have been told now for 100 years. And we kind of were in this groove of that's what the pinnacle of a big story should look and feel like. Typically with a happy ending, typically where the key characters come together and yes, the world is bloody saved and all these sorts of things. We kind of know. And I love the idea of doing something that's a surprise or insightful that you weren't expecting. And and that's kind of my shtick.
This is sort of an era where that barrier to entry has dropped a lot. And I feel like in any era like that, you keep contrasting it with Hollywood films where the barrier to entry is very high, but it does leave room for different types of storytelling like you're talking about. You also mentioned that your methodology has changed over time. What was the way you approached it at first?
Well, I suppose the world's changed as well, Brian. So when I first started making films, I thought I'd be really happy if one of my pseudo-adventure films would get on local television. Or if I really hit it out of the box, it goes on Nat Geo and they sell it to broadcasters throughout the world. This was certainly before the internet when I started making films. So I went through university without a mobile phone or Google, for example, and that's only 20 odd years ago. So things have rapidly changed where we have multimedia in our pockets and we have choice up the wazoo. So as a first-time storyteller, it was, okay, can I tell something that's like what I watch on TV? And I did it all wrong. I looked at kind of the hero lens of doing something grand, doing something that hasn't been done before, trying to get the prettiest shots or going to the most exotic locations. And it was super flawed in so many ways, I'm a much better storyteller now, but I still think I'm just kind of getting the idea of how to tap into what interests you. How do I make something that's interesting for someone I've never met? And so many of the great creatives out there now say that never, ever create anything for anyone else. Create it for yourself. I've been really kind of critical of that for a long time because as a writer, right, I wrote my PhD 6 or 8 years ago, and my supervisor then said, always write for an audience, always write for someone. Otherwise, what's the point, And so I whenever I make an idea or come up with a small synopsis or a small script idea, I think, who gives a heck about that idea? So I often ask that. And then my counter to that is, okay, fair enough. No one's going to give a crap about anything you do unless you make it fun in a sense too. Don't make something overly serious because you don't want to waste someone's time. Make it fun so that if nothing else, there mightn't be any great meaning behind your story, but at least you haven't wasted their time because they've had an okay time watching it. So that they're kind of some of the principles I run by.
We get that with our conservation work sometimes because we spun a conservation nonprofit out of a Facebook meme page. And I really expected when we did that for people to ask us, why should we give you our money? You make a meme page. But I actually got the opposite thing where people were like, how can you make jokes when you're doing conservation stuff? I don't know, that's like, honestly, I get asked this question. And when I do interviews about it, people ask me like, how can you make jokes when you work in this field that's got this dire problem? And I'm like, well, that's what the people are here for, is the jokes and like the silliness. And we're kind of just lucky and grateful that they'll come along with us for the trying to do something beneficial outside of just enjoying the moment. I just think that people have this dichotomy in their head between serious and enjoyable or serious and happy, and they don't think that you can be both at the same time.
Yeah. And that's a real shame. And I think that's the problem with, or the difficulty rather, with conservation and with a larger green movement, is it often ends up in the hopelessness of it. And I know that's talked about an awful lot because I think there are some things that kind of feel hopeless, but I have to work in ways where it's not. Otherwise, why have I had kids? Why have I had kids if I think the world's hopeless? So I must think that there's some kind of goodness in the world to bring along more humans, and so I have to lean into that. Otherwise, things are as dire as you can certainly think. I know. I am an optimist by nature, I think, but it's a bloody tough game. So when in doubt, make it fun, because I think that's just a better option.
I think so too. We've got some listener questions for you here.
Cool.
Conrad asks, does good facial hair make a good conservationist?
Yes, but I know I'm probably blocking out about half the planet though when I say that. So you can take a Sharpie and colour your face in, and I suppose if that kind of gives you the same impression, sure. I shaved 2 days ago, so I feel a bit naked in the world, and I feel like I've lost a little bit of myself. So I get it. But no, a big hat though. I'm all about a big hat. I think a big hat makes you a conservationist.
It's either or though. You can't combine them. That would just be too much.
Probably not. No, it's just faux pas. Then it's
too powerful.
Yes, just pick one. Pick one.
Aaron asked, what's the scariest thing you've been through while kayaking?
It's the opening of my book and my PhD, actually. It was day 62, I think. So I'd been paddling a few months down the coast of Africa, and a big rogue wave came charging out of the deep. And it's the most petrifying thing I've ever seen. I never want to see that wave again. I have the hugest respect for big wave surfers when they take that on as sport. I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to run the other way.
What was your thought when you saw it? Was it like disbelief that something could be?
Kind of like, why is that there? I'm 6 or 8 kilometres offshore. There shouldn't be a wave breaking this far out. Not when it's, it was choppy, but that's the little fluffy stuff on top of the water, not a big swell like that. So it was scary. And it all happened pretty quick. I couldn't tell you the time frame. It was all a bit of a vacuum of fear and flight. I couldn't fight the wave, so I had to go as fast as I could, and I turned into it rather than with it. And so, yeah. But it was that full body, void yourself too. When I got away with it, it was like, wow. I was a bit of a mess there for a few minutes, just trying to gather my thoughts and. What if another one comes? It probably wouldn't have killed me, but it would have punched me out of the boat, and I'm a long way from shore. Sharks everywhere. I can't swim 6 or 7 kilometres into shore. That's probably me done. So, that was bad. But it has changed my perception of risk since that moment and how I go about my everyday.
In what way did it change your perception of risk?
Well, I'll never go up Everest, because I still have a desire to go and do some high-end mountaineering and some real big landscape stuff, or not necessarily Everest, but just get into some mountaineering. But I will never set off and think a peak or a crossing or something that's momentous is worth it for death. I'm just not. Whereas some mountaineers will, some of those, Alex Honnold, when he climbs without a rope. And he's a very calculated guy, and he's very good at what he does, but it's still so edgy. I would never go to that edge because it's just not worth it, because the crumbly rock that your foot is holding, or the decision you've made to push out that day and paddle that day when you probably shouldn't have, and your gut tells you not, but you think, I've got to go anyway because I need to bloody get where I'm going. I'll never say. Essentially, it's trying to trust myself more and say, just don't go when it feels wrong.
Yeah, trusting your gut is always important, especially when there's no kind of like real rules or guidelines as to no one's telling you can't go out and paddle today. But when you get that feeling that you probably shouldn't, you can listen to it.
Yeah, that's right, Io. It's a young person's game, and that's kind of where you got to go scare the shit out of yourself sometimes. I think to maybe come up with a better default. So yeah, I've got that. It's getting better.
I've heard that described as the first time that you realize, oh, I can die. Right before that, it was like conceptual, and then there's a visceral. Oh man, there's actually the possibility out there.
Yeah. Your immortality suddenly crashes down upon you, and that's a really good thing, because I think you just use time better, you make better decisions, and you know what, the best stories, I went through a phase of reading. It was part of the PhD process too. I've read every sea kayaking book I can get my hands on for the last 100 years about people doing amazing things in a sea kayak, and there's some amazing stories in there, incredible stories. But half of some of the best stories are not of ones of where it's the biggest trip or the most remarkable thing. It's how they've told their narrative. And so I just think that's a better, powerful mechanism. Be better at what you say and do rather than necessarily doing the hardest thing.
How did you get out of the wave? So did you go over it, or like what wound up happening?
Yeah, so I'm traveling from north to south, so all of the weather is on my left-hand side. I'm in the lower third of the Channel of Mozambique, which is quite a famous tract of water that attracts rogue waves. It almost sunk the Queen Mary there sometime mid-century. So it's famous for rogue waves. So I'm traveling south. The weather and the waves and the swell is on my left. I see this big wave on my left, and I can either turn into the face and try and get over it before it breaks, or I turn right and run with it, or try and outrun it. I'm never going to outrun a wave, but I might be able to get half of it's dissipated, big white foamy stuff wash over me, and maybe you can stay up, but it was just too big. So I had to go up the wave, basically climb up this wave that's getting steeper and more fierce, hissing. It's got amazing. I don't know how big it was, whether it's 6, 8, 10 metres. It was freaking big. And it was the start of a giant swell that had me landlocked then for 7 or 8 days afterwards. So, yeah, I had to turn into it, and I got over it just before it broke.
Wow.
Billy asked, what's the most valuable outdoor knowledge you could share with a teenager?
Be alone. Go out there and be alone. You can be safe, absolutely be safe. But this is where edgy experiences are really encouraged, because a lot of people think going and spending a night in the bush is edgy, and it's just bloody not. If worst comes to worst, you're going to get bitten by bugs and have a crap night's sleep, and you might come home thirsty, So, yes, pick your season and pick the temperature and all that stuff. But be alone. Go out there and spend some time in your own thoughts. Don't take the phone with you. Barely take a book. I wouldn't take things that distract you too much from being out there. Be busy being out there. That's making a shelter, setting up your tent, boiling a billy. Do things that require you to eat and be sheltered and hear things. And that takes many forms. I like being active and physical in the outdoors, because you can't help but to take on all of its influences. So, yeah, just be alone. You guys too, you might reflect on yourselves. When did you last spend 24 hours with only your own company? And very few people can say they've spent 24 hours in their own company, especially recently. They might have at some stage in their life, but doing that in regular doses, I think, is important.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Connor asked, is there hope for restoration of Australia's degraded rivers?
Good question. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a money game and it's a time game. If we all just stop now, and even the worst of our mines and the worst of our rivers in cities or whatever it might be, if we were to just stop all of the bad things we're doing to these rivers, they're going to fix themselves in 10 or 100 or 10,000 years. They're going to fix themselves. But we have done some long-term damage, sure, and we're the only things that can fast-track that, and money and time and energy is what can fix it. Whether it happens, I don't know what will happen in the Queen River down in Tasmania, for example, because they've essentially chopped a mountain in half, and to regenerate that mountain is very hard but it's not impossible, of course. Golly, look at the projects that are happening around the world, golly. So I don't know, other than to say I think they're probably only getting better. I hope to think our rivers are only getting better. We don't dump our rubbish in them anymore. Mines have got far more environmental overlays. We know we need precious metals, so mines are a thing. That's fine. Okay, so we just need to do them better. So I think there is a sense that we've got better systems in play, but I think what often doesn't come up in conversation is let's just use less. We all want to have our cake and eat it too. So I just want to use less, I suppose, and that just helps out with the problem. But it often doesn't get said as much as it should.
Well, I think that's probably a good spot to leave off on. Do you have anything you'd like to plug before we go?
Not really. Go do good stuff. Have a. I don't know when this podcast is going to come out, but being self-critical is really good. When people call me a good human, I'm uncomfortable with that because of the things I still do that are impacting my carbon footprint, what I say, or probably more so what I don't say. I probably don't use my goodwill or good influence enough for better causes. But that said, look, people can make up their own minds. Go check me out on YouTube and think if I'm a raving lunatic or someone worth watching, that'd be great. Otherwise, thanks for doing what you folks do. And yeah, it's been nice talking to you.
I love what you said of be busy being outside is I'm going to take that into just my life. Be occupied with being out and being present in nature is a great thing.
Yeah, it's a great takeaway. Nice and simple. Just go out there and do stuff. And not necessarily that's technological driven in terms of a phone or a screen or a book or whatever. Just go out and fix things, make things, split wood, walk places, try and see 5 birds, whatever it is. Just come up with a little thing that occupies you.
Yeah.
Read books, split wood, and try to find 5 birds. That's going to be my next shirt, I think.
That's a ripper. Yeah, if you ever make that shirt, you send one along. That'll be good. I'll pay good money for that.
Yeah, get you the royalties for it.
Well, that's our show. Thanks for listening. You can support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/wildgreenmemes. That's memes with an M. If you subscribe before December 31st at the possum or shark level, we'll send you a really cool sticker sheet with lots of things you can stack to make your own real-life elf on a shelf memes. Until next time, I'm Rhett.
I'm Io.
And I'm Brian.
And I'm Beau.
And happy Year of the Raccoon.